where are all the good men? This is one of the questions that I get the most. So what we need to do in order to find our person, someone we want to build a life with, because remember, this is one of the most important decisions that we will ever make in our life, is who we decide to build a family with, who we decide to build a life with, and we always want to put the odds in our favor. Now, it's well known that many people meet on dating apps, but some people, they're opposed to it, or they want to really meet somebody in real life. So how can we put the odds in your favor? The first thing we've got to find out is, where are the good men? Where are the guys that you want to meet? So right now we have a 2x2 decision matrix. And if you were never into mathematics, I'm going to make it super simple. So on the top part, it is going to be, how likely are there to be men that want to interact? So as an example, we could go to something like the movies, and high likelihood there are guys there, but it's unlikely that we're going to interact with those guys because, movies like a sit down, everyone's quiet, nobody's talking. So let's go through this. So in the left quadrant, what we have is we have a section where it is likely to interact with men, but you may be unlikely to enjoy it. And this is a really good exercise. And I'm not saying the places that I put each one of these different events and ideas is exactly where you would list them. But when we want to find out where you should be spending more time to go and find more relationship-driven men, commitment-driven men, these are different places. So here are some places that have a high likelihood of guys, and you can interact with them, but you're very unlikely to enjoy it. So I put in here a cigar lounge. I know some women like to smoke cigars, but I find it to be quite uncommon. Maybe video gaming, a Bitcoin conference, car shows, powerlifting. So those are places, there's a high likelihood there's guys there. And if those things speak to you, definitely go, because you're going to meet a bunch of guys. But we want to put you in places that are not only going to have a high likelihood of guys, but are going to have a high likelihood that you're actually going to enjoy it. Because if you don't want to do it, you're going to be like, oh, I'd rather just stay in. Or you're not going to be your best self because you're not going to be in environments that you want. So similarly, on this bottom left axis, you're unlikely to enjoy it, and you're unlikely to interact with men. So, some people like knitting class, but overall, I don't see many people liking it. Tap dancing class, ballet recital. So those places, they're unlikely to have men, and you're unlikely to enjoy it. And you can put whatever you want in these sections. I'm just putting some general examples that I think of. So now let's move on to the section where you're unlikely to interact with men, but you could enjoy it. And these are things, you should do for your own, personal fulfillment. I've worked with many charities and animal volunteering. Unfortunately, it mostly tends to attract women. So you're likely to enjoy it. It's probably going to bring a lot of fulfillment to your life, but you're unlikely to interact with the men you want. Then we've got things like yoga retreat, also great. Broadway shows, wine and paint nights. Wine and paint nights, highly recommend once we already have someone we really like. Great 5th date option, great 6th date option. Taylor Swift concert. Again, this could be, a Shakira concert. This could be whatever. You want to find out, like, hey, is this an artist that largely has a female audience? Then we want to bring our girlfriends to it. It's not necessarily a place we're going to want to meet men. So now, finally, we've gotten to the put the odds in your favor. So where are places that you might enjoy and you have a high likelihood of meeting friends? So let's think brewery tours, co-ed sports leagues. Like, for example, I used to organize a co-ed volleyball league. Great place to meet a spouse. Run clubs have become super popular. They're not my favorite because I'm not much of a runner. You could go to boxing class, trivia nights. These are great places. And I have a little bonus for you if you stuck this far. So where can we also find affluent men? I know not everyone's going to be like, gold digging. No, that's not the case. At the end of the day, life is easier when you have money. So I'm not saying it's everyone's end goal, but if you really do want to find an affluent man, let's go over some of the places that the affluent tend to hang out. And unfortunately, this spot is not as polished, but I used to be in a bunch of charity galas and fundraisers, especially causes like arts, education, health. Rich men tend to love to, donate to charity. Look for charities, art foundations, things that have galas. Anything that you can dress up fancy for and donate so you can have a tax write-off. When you're thinking rich man, think, where are tax write-offs? It just is what it is. So charity galas, fundraisers, and one thing to keep in mind is that not all charities, so similar to our 2x2 matrix, and we'll go back to this, their charity fundraisers are a great place to interact with men, but not all charities appeal to men the same. So as an example, in New York, I used to be a part of the Central Park Conservatory, and they'd have a gala every single year. It was beautiful. However, that specific event was usually 90 to 95% women. I don't know for what reason, but you have to think, hey, is this a charity that is going to specifically appeal to guys? If not, do it with your girlfriends, but you're very unlikely to meet a guy there. Private membership clubs. Think Soho House in Philadelphia. There's a Philadelphia Cricket Club. Fancy places where you can meet someone. You don't always have to be a member. Like you don't always have to shell out the big bucks, but can we get a friend to invite us? High-end resorts. Think things like Canyon Ranch. If something is $1,000 a night, you're very likely to meet some very affluent people there. Art gallery openings. Now, this is something that doesn't require a bunch of money. So in New York City, and I'm sure elsewhere, there are specific areas of the city that are very focused on charity, very focused on art galleries. So Thursday in New York, in a specific part of the town, they always have galleries. So you could gallery hop, a bunch of cheap wine, a bunch of interesting people. And the nice thing about an art gallery is you could see something in the wall. You can make a side comment. So as a woman, and honestly as a man, it is very uncomfortable to approach and kind of make your intentions known that you want to talk with somebody. But at something like an art gallery, you can make a side comment. You could be like, I don't know if I understand this painting at all, or just make an analogy to something. Be like, does that look like a starfish? And most people don't take themselves so seriously. They might laugh, and now you're in a conversation. High-end wine tasting. My family really likes to go on wine tours, and those are great places to meet people. Scotch nights, honestly, I'm not much of a whiskey drinker, so if I had to look at this, that would be a likely to interact with men, but an unlikely for me to enjoy it, so I wouldn't personally go. Then we've got things like golf tournaments, tennis, paddle, country club. All of these things are great places to meet affluent guys or to meet guys in general. And if you're not like, hey, I don't need an affluent guy, at the end of the day, sports leagues, think softball, think different things that are going to bring people together. So co-ed sports leagues. If you want a really affluent guy, entrepreneurship, finance conferences. They're largely going to be focused on business growth, venture capital, leadership. Highly recommend them. They have some spiritual retreats, and spiritual retreats are an interesting one. So you definitely depends. Like there's not going to be as many guys at a yoga retreat, but depending on who the guru is, who the person is, there's going to be some great guys there. Yacht club shows and boat parties. There's something about the male brain. They just love boats. I love boats. So if you can get around at yacht clubs, there are different places where you can take sailing lessons. So if I think about New York specifically and other places, they'll usually have a yacht club, and you can actually go and join, or you can go to dinner there, or you can go take sailing lessons. Tons of very good guys there. Ski lodges, anything that screams affluence. Certain cities that have a disproportionate ratio. Think about San Francisco, Dubai, Marbella, Spain, Monaco, France, Palm Beach, Hamptons, all of those things. And then finally, F1 races. So at the end of the day, you may not particularly be like, I need a rich man. You can just make this 2x2 matrix for yourself, and you're like, okay, let me list out a bunch of events in my city, things that are going on that I know exist. And if you don't know the things that are going on, Instagram, TikTok, Meetup, tons of different ways that you can find other opportunities in your city. Heck, local newspapers, local newsletters are going to give you a ton of information about what's going on in your city. And then you're pretty much just going to rank them out. You're going to say, hey, how likely is this event to appeal to men and they're going to be interacting with me? Versus how much am I going to enjoy it? So something that falls in that quadrant of being like, hey, likely to have guys that are going to be yapping and likely that I'm going to enjoy it. Those are the events we want to target.